where you live, and where your kids go to school. On the Plan and Prepare page, you'll find a plan template. It's important to know what you're going to do, what you're going to take with you, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to go, and how to get there.
One great way to prepare is to pack a go bag. Each member of your family should have their own go bag. Visit our website, mendoready.org, to get a list of items that should be in your go bag.
Today's meeting of the Mendocino County Planning Commission for May 7th, 2026. The Commission has received a request from Commissioner Marie Jones for her to participate remotely. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision C, Commissioner Jones will be participating remotely as a reasonable accommodation for a temporary physical disability. Under Section 54953, Commissioner Jones's participation is treated as in-person physical attendance, including quorum. Commissioner Jones is required to disclose whether any other individuals 18 years of age or older are present in the room at the remote location and the general nature of the member's relationship with those individuals. Commissioner Jones, can you please make those disclosures?
Sure. My partner, Cynthia Sharon, is located in the house. However, she's not in the room. And I apologize for not being there in person, but I have 6 broken ribs and a broken clavicle. Lucky me.
Oh, heal quickly.
Thank you.
Deputy County Counsel, are there any other disclosures, anything that need to be said? Okay. Well then, Madam Clerk, would you please conduct the roll call?
All right. Commissioner Johnson? Here. Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Richards?
Here.
Chair Paulin?
Here.
Commissioner Wiedemann is absent by prearrangement.
All right, thank you. All right, agenda item number 2. This is the Planning Commission administration. Do we have determination of legal notice?
All items on the agenda have received legal notice.
Thank you very much. A director's report. Do we have a report from our multiple directors?
Good morning, Commissioners. Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. I have no real formal report other than I mentioned this at the Board of Supervisors meeting on Tuesday as well, and I just want to make sure this information is out there. We've been experiencing that there's been a series of fraudulent emails being sent to Planning and Building Services applicants, and those emails are posing as myself, the director, and requesting funds be wire transferred to these individuals. So we just want to make sure folks know that wire transfer is not a form of payment that we accept at the county. And if they're concerned, if they received a fraudulent email, they should contact our office and we can verify whether or not it's a valid email and whether or not they should proceed with any payments. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Did you get my wire transfer?
I did not.
Oh.
Sorry.
Jeez.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, agenda item number 4, matters from the public. Members of the public are welcome to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking action on matters not on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the Planning Commission under matters from the public may do so in person, via email, or Zoom. If any members of the public are logged into the Zoom meeting who wish to speak under public expression, please use the raise hand feature to allow staff to add you to the meeting. Do we have any requests under telecomment for public expression?
No telecomment has been received.
All right. Any members in the room wishing to speak? Seeing none. Can you see if we have Zoom?
There are no hands raised in Zoom.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll move on. Agenda item number 5 is the consent calendar. This is the approval of the Planning Commission the meeting minutes from April 16th, 2026. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve without changes.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, thanks, Marie. All right.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Richards?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Chair Paulin?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on, agenda item number 6. This is our regular calendar. Today we have presentation, discussion, and possible direction to staff regarding the 2027-2035 Housing Element Update Process and Environmental Justice Element by PlaceWorks Incorporated. I'll now open the public hearing. Have there been any correspondence or telephone calls received on this item?
Any comments have been posted to the public website.
Thank you very much. All right, can we have a presentation from staff, please?
Good morning, Russ Ford, Senior Planner. So the presentation is going to be given by PlaceWorks staff, and we're just going to bring them over into the meeting.
All right, thank you.
All right, good morning, Cynthia Walsh with PlaceWorks. Let me get my screen all set up. Give me just one moment. All right, does that look okay on your end?
We can see it, thank you.
Perfect, okay. All right, so we are here to kick off the 7th cycle housing element and your new environmental justice element. So we're just gonna jump right in. So for the agenda today, we have just some short introductions. We're going to touch on a housing element overview, go over some of the new state housing laws for this cycle, go over some housing needs for the county, discuss the regional housing needs allocation, also called the RHNA, and then we'll jump over to the environmental justice element, and then we'll go over the project schedule moving forward from here. So for your county staff, we have your director, Julia Krog, and Russell Ford. They'll be leading the efforts on that side. And then for PlaceWorks, we have Jennifer Gastelum, myself, Cynthia Walsh, who's the project manager for this effort. Mark Hoffman, who's also with me today, is leading our environmental justice effort. And then Holly Safran is our assistant PM on the project. So when you're updating a housing element, there tends to be a lot of planning jargon that goes along with the update. So we just wanted to touch on some key terms and acronyms. So starting with HCD, which is the California Department of Housing and Community Development, RHNA, or the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. Sometimes we refer to the housing element as HE, Environmental Justice Element as EJ. Accessory dwelling units, I'm sure you're all aware, ADU. AMI is area median income. APR is an annual progress report, and this is something that you do every year, April 1st, to report on the programs in your housing element. CEQA, California Environment Quality Act. SB, Senate Bill. AB, Assembly Bill. DUC is or a DUC, sometimes referred to, is a disadvantaged unincorporated community. And then MCOG is obviously your Mendocino Council of Governments. So to jump right into the housing element is one of your 8 mandated elements of the general plan. And this is a unique document in that it does need to be reviewed and certified by California Department of Housing and Community Development. The housing element is due on August 15th, 2027, and it is an 8-year planning period. So it will run from that 2027 date all the way through August 15th, 2035. So the housing element is made up of several different components. We have your housing needs assessment, and this is really your data heavy portion of the document. This is where we're looking at demographics, we're looking at housing needs, we're looking at population, things like that. Your fair housing assessment, this is going to be a brand new section of your document. We'll touch on that in a few slides down, but this will be looking at fair housing issues and then strategies to address any barriers that are identified. We also have the housing sites analysis, and this is where we're taking an inventory of the current land available in the county and kind of doing a capacity analysis based off of what you currently have, how many units could be developed. We'll also do an analysis of your constraints. So we'll be looking at your processing procedures, your development standards, fees, things like that. We'll also do an evaluation of your current housing element programs, and we'll identify what was accomplished, what we might want to modify, and what has been, we want to continue on into the next housing element. And once we've done all of those sections, then we look at updating your goals, policies, and programs. So we take in all of our findings from that, and then we also take in feedback that we've heard from the public along the way. So this is the typical update process, and it is a rather lengthy process. Right now, we are in the admin draft phase of the elements, and we will work on that, and then we will provide that for staff to review. Then we will release the document. We will create a public review document, and we will release that to the public for 30 days. If we receive comments during that 30-day review period, then we have an additional 10 days to review and incorporate any feedback we received. Once we've addressed those comments, then we will submit the document to HCD, and that is a 90-day review period. So it'll be with the state for 90 days. After the end of that, we will receive a findings letter from the state saying, here are some additional items that need to be addressed before you're in compliance. So after that, we will revise the draft and release those revisions for a 7-day review period to the public. Then we will resubmit the revised draft to HCD, which is now a 60-day review period. We are hopeful at the end of that second review period that HCD will send a letter stating that we've met all of the requirements, and once adopted, will be found in compliance. Based off of our experience from the 6th cycle, 2 rounds of review is hopeful, 3 rounds of review is usually typical. So we'll see how it is kind of HCD's downtime. So we're hoping that we can get more attention from them. So after we receive that letter stating, once adopted, we will take the housing element through the adoption, the hearing process, so Planning Commission, and then to the board. And then we have a final 60-day certification review with the state. And then after that, that's when you finally receive that letter that says your housing element has been found in compliance. So it's a very lengthy process. So touching on a few new laws for this cycle. So there is one new income category. In the previous cycle, we had introduced extremely low income, and now we're introducing acutely low. And this is anyone making 15% of the area median income or less. So for a 4-person household in Mendocino County, that is $14,000. So any 4-person household making $14,000 or less falls into this income category. So we will go through, and as we are analyzing income and households, we will have information in that background report that touches on this. There's also new state law around historic designations and whether or not those are limiting to the ability of actually meeting your housing goals. So we will look at that. And then there's also some tighter rezones. So if for some reason the county needed to rezone to find additional capacity to hit that RHNA target, then we would have a shorter time frame if we didn't adopt on time. If we adopt the housing element on time, you still have 3 years to complete those rezones. If you missed that adoption deadline, then you would have only 1 year to complete your rezones. So as I mentioned earlier, AB 686, or Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, is going to be a brand new section in your housing element for this 7th cycle. And this requires public agencies to take meaningful actions to overcome segregation and expand housing opportunity. So we will analyze segregation and disparities in opportunity where those might exist. We will look at different resource areas in the county. We'll also avoid policies where we're concentrating certain income groups in different areas of the county. And then we'll also include documenting actions of efforts that are currently taken. So this kind of gets into a little bit more detail. So we will complete a lengthy analysis, and we will look at patterns of integration and segregation, touching on income, disabilities, demographic characteristics, familial status, things like that. We'll also look at displacement risk, considering overcrowding, housing costs, homelessness, housing conditions, access to opportunities. So who has access to transit, who has access to jobs, environmental health, schools, things like that. And then we will also look at things such as land use patterns. We will rely on local knowledge to get a real understanding of where things are happening within the county, and then looking at anti-displacement strategies. I do see a hand raised. I'm not sure if
Commissioner Jones, would you like, excuse me, Commissioner Jones, would you like to ask a question? Commissioner Jones, can you hear us? You've got your hand raised. And you think you're muted if you're trying to talk. Okay. Well, if she comes back, we'll...
All right, I'll keep an eye out.
Hold on a second.
Oh.
Deputy County Counsel, do we need to... Yeah. We're gonna pause for a moment just because it's like she just left the room. But...
Sorry, I didn't leave the room. My internet is unstable and it kicked me off, and I came back on and then I got demoted, so I wasn't a panelist anymore. So I was actually just raising my hand to be made a panelist. That was all.
Uh-huh.
Just so you guys knew I was there. But no biggie. We're all good. Thank
Okay,
you. Sorry.
Can we make her a panelist?
You don't need
Oh.
to. I don't mind being in the background. I can always unmute myself and ask
Okay,
questions.
yeah,
if I
feel
have
free
them.
to chime in if we don't see your hand or know you're trying to get in.
No problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Cynthia, go ahead. Continue, please.
Perfect, will do. Okay, so why should we comply with the housing element? So first, it is obviously a state law requirement. A compliant housing element does keep the county in control of development. A non-compliant housing element does expose the county to possible lawsuits. Grant funding is sometimes tied to housing element compliance. There are different funding requirements there. And then the state does have a new housing accountability unit, and they have been monitoring compliance with housing elements and housing element implementation. So we have to keep that in mind, that when we are creating programs for this next cycle for you to implement, we want to make sure that they're things you can actually achieve, because HCD will be watching every move that you make. Okay, so the regional housing needs allocation. I should note that this is still a draft allocation. Allocation is still being worked out between your Council of Governments and HCD, but we are using the draft numbers for this presentation today. So the state hands down a number to your Council of Governments, Mendocino Council of Governments. And once it's at the COG level, the COG looks at different factors, median household income, overcrowding, cost burden throughout the county. And then that number is dispersed between the different cities and the unincorporated county. So as of right now, the unincorporated county has a share of 3,690 units. On the next slide, I have a little more information. So you can see in the pie chart how the allocation has been broken out currently. So you can see that the unincorporated county does carry a majority of that allocation at 58%. Fort Bragg being, well, Ukiah would be next at 25%, Fort Bragg at 10%, and then Willits at 7%, and Point Arena at less than 1%. So that's the current distribution, and we do believe it will stay about at that, what it is right now. So the table on the right, this then you take your RENA, and then your RENA is broken out into several different income categories. So we have that acutely low, which is again our new income category this year, this cycle. And we have 174 units there. Extremely low, 446, very low, 401, low, 566, moderate, 427, and then above moderate, which is just your market rate, is 1676 for that total of 3,690. It is important to note that it's not the county's responsibility to build these units, but you do need to plan and ensure that you have sites available should someone want to come in and build them. So it's not your job to build the units, but you do need to have land at varying densities so that they could be built.
Can I ask you a question on that, Cynthia?
Of course.
So I'm just looking back at our last housing element, and it says basically how many units we could potentially develop in Mendocino County. And obviously, I know there have been some changes since it was adopted last. But the realistic number of units at that point, according to this document that I'm looking at, it was like 3,307. So it seems as if we're being, they're asking us that we need to be able to develop more than we reasonably could. At least according to the most recent data. Is this basically stating that the state is mandating that we rezone or we make some changes to make additional units available that are not currently?
Yeah, so we will do a complete inventory of where you are right now and what your land looks like. There could have been projects that have come forward since the last housing element. You can also look at accessory dwelling units as a way of meeting a portion of your need. So we'll look at different ways of meeting that need. But yes, if we cannot find the land or the strategies, then we would need to rezone sites to accommodate that shortfall.
So this is a mandated number that we have to be able to accommodate according to state law. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the state puts out income limits every year. So for 2025, for a 4-person household in Mendocino County, the area median income is $93,900. You can see the different households, 1-person household, 2, 3, 4, up to 5. The state does show on their website up to 8. We just stopped at 5 for this analysis. But you can see the different median incomes. And then you can see that a 4-person low-income household is anyone making less than $75,000 a year. So going into that a little bit more, again, the median income for a 4-person household in Mendocino County is $93,900. And a low-income household is making $75,100 or less. Now, based off of the census data, about 54% of households in Mendocino County fall into that lower income category. Further broken down in the table, you can see the percent of each income group. So there are 5% of households that are acutely low, 14% extremely low, 18% very low, and 28% low, which make up that 54%. And then on the right, you can see a typical occupation that lines up with these different income categories. So for your acutely low, you're looking at part-time agricultural workers. Extremely low, this could be cashiers, home health workers, care aides. Very low, this could again be similar, maybe dishwashers at restaurants. Low incomes, we're looking at even construction, therapists, social workers, things like that. So those are the people who fall into these different categories. So how affordable is Mendocino County? So we did a survey of sales prices looking at 2-bedroom homes and 3-bedroom homes. So for the average 2-bedroom home sales price, it was about $464,000. For 3-bedroom, it was obviously a little bit more, about $520,000. For your rental rates, looking again in February, and this is considering all size rentals, we're looking at about $2,000 a month for rent. The table below shows you what the maximum affordable sales price and rental price would be for these different income categories. And this is just taking 30% of your income and assuming that would be affordable. So if we look at the moderate income max sales price, that's $484,000. So moderate is really the only household that can afford a home currently in Mendocino County. Again, this is looking at average, so it's not looking at the lowest or the highest. We're just looking at the average here. So it's possible there are lower prices out there that maybe low income could get into. Looking at the average rents, we're looking at that $1,950. So that does look like it's within reach of a lower income household. Again, that is an average, so there's probably lower and some higher there. So who is affected by these prices? So housing cost burden refers to overpaying, and overpaying means that you're paying more than 30% of your housing costs, your income on housing costs. Severely overpaying is if you're paying more than 50%. So the chart on the right shows you extremely low, very low, and low income. The blue is owners and the green is renters, and it's showing you who is overpaying. So for extremely low income households, there are 14% of renters overpaying for housing, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing costs. That same number would be, that same category would be 15% for very low, and then all the way up to 25% of low income renters are overpaying. And then the blue shows you for owners. So the housing element also touches on state required special needs groups. So these are the different groups that we will analyze in the housing element and provide a little bit more detail to each of them. So you have about a quarter of your households in, population in the county are seniors, so 65 or older. About 18.5% have a disability. 5% are overcrowded households. 19% fall into that extremely low income category. About 20% are female-headed households, and 9% are large, and a large household is 5 persons or more. So I'm going to hand this over to Mark, and he's going to go through the environmental justice element.
Before you go into that, could we take a minute and ask questions as planning commissioners or just make observations?
Please. Commissioner Jones, would you like to kick us off?
Oh, it's so frustrating. If you can hear me, I'd love to have the housing element take a look at the way in which vacation rentals is impacting affordability for local residents, especially in our higher income coastal area. I think it's a pretty big impact.
Commissioner Jones, do you have any other questions or comments at this point? Oh.
Sorry, I lost you for a minute there.
Okay, we lost you in impact. Do you want to finish that sentiment?
Yeah, I'd really like to have the housing element look at the impact of vacation rentals, especially for moderate and lower income households in the coastal zone area of Mendocino County. I think there are about 3,000 vacation rentals, which is more units than have been built in the county in the past 20 years. And so for the housing element to be silent on this topic is really a big deal. And also, I think it should include some policies to address the challenge if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
In regards to when you look at constraints, given the required amount of potential units that are going to be required for the arena, will you go into an analysis and look into water? Because that seems like a very real constraint. And what level of detail will you go into, and will it be included in the housing?
Yeah, great question. So the housing element will include a thorough analysis. There was one in the last housing element, so we will start there. And then we will reach out to the different service districts to ensure that there is capacity. And then we will have to identify that water and sewer is either available or planned for all of the sites that we plan to use to meet the arena. That is a requirement. So there will be a thorough analysis included.
What about availability? So what I'm hearing you say is that you're just making sure that they can get the water, but what about availability of water to meet the needs of the new housing development?
So because there isn't a specific development yet proposed, we wouldn't be looking at the availability just yet. We're just making sure that should someone want to come in, they would have access to that water.
And will you, as part of that, will there be an area of ways of essentially mitigating that, or not mitigating it, but making sure that there's programs and implementation measures to make sure to find water, or to make sure that that is available?
Yeah, we will work with staff to identify programs that make sense to include to ensure that that water and sewer are available. Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Richards, did you have any questions at this point? I had one for you, Cynthia. Again, I don't mean to keep hearkening back to the old element, because I know that that's not what we're working on with this update, but it is instructive, and I'm curious in looking at the sort of the income categories as they're laid out under RENA, and how those align with, in the last element in the site inventory, they break down all of the potentially developable housing units. And in that, they list an income category. And in there, it's above moderate, moderate, and lower. And looking at the breakdown, and I haven't done a thorough analysis of it, it seems that we are far below the thresholds that we would need to have for RENA for lower. Even if lower includes low, very low, extremely low, and acutely low, we still have far, far less unit or developable sites that would fall under that classification, at least according to the old element. And I wonder, is there a discrepancy between how those things are qualified in those different documents? And then there's very little that we can do to change the developable cost of a parcel. And so I'm wondering how that interfaces with our RENA requirement.
Sure. Great question. So a couple of things there. So when we are looking at affordability, we're looking at density. The state sees a higher density as affordable to lower income, a moderate density, moderate, and then obviously your market rate is your single family, your above moderate RENA. So when once it becomes a project, then we have to actually look at, what is the rent, what is the sales price? But if it's just land, we're looking at density. So density equals affordability in HCD's eyes. Unfortunately, with every cycle, it seems like the regional housing needs allocation, the state is asking more and more and more. So there is a high potential that we would have to find additional sites to rezone. And we will work with staff to identify where services are available. We're not going to rezone a property where it doesn't make sense. We're going to look at ensure that there's infrastructure, water, sewer, utilities, things like that. But that will be, once we get into the sites inventory, we'll identify what we're looking for and how many acres that is. And then we'll start trying to identify sites that we could potentially rezone. Because yeah, your number is larger this cycle than you had to accommodate last cycle.
Yeah, and I guess I'm sure you are aware, or you definitely will be aware as you're doing this analysis, that the available services are rather limited here in Mendocino County. I mean, it's the 4 incorporated cities and a few areas around them where additional, at least large-scale, water and sewer and things are available. So there's not a lot of low-hanging fruit left out there, it feels like.
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Jones, you have your hand up again. Would you like to ask another question? All right, Commissioner Jones, I assume that's a...
Sorry, I'm just not used to doing this on my cell phone. It's like a
yes.
whole new world. So I wanted to recommend that you look at East Fort Bragg because we do have sewer and water in that part of Mendocino County. And unfortunately, those communities don't really want to largely be annexed to the city because it would require that they upgrade their roads and sidewalks, and that gets very expensive. But I think there might be some sort of middle route here where we might be able to expand the area of the municipal services district in collaboration with the county with some rezoning of some of the property in East Fort Bragg to higher densities than exist right now. So that's just an idea for you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? All right, thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, Cynthia, for your presentation. Look forward to seeing the report as it comes along. Mark, I think it got passed over to you before we interrupted you.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Mark Hoffman. I'm a principal also with PlaceWorks, and I'll be presenting on the environmental justice overview. Next slide, please. So what is an environmental justice element? I think that's the first question. And where did this mandate actually come from? Well, there was a law called SB 1000 that was passed in 2018 that requires that comprehensive general plans include goals, policies, and programs that address health and environmental justice in their jurisdiction. And secondly, general plan guidelines have also been recently revised to recommend that general plans also address environmental justice as well as the health and wellness of residents. And finally, the third trend is really the Mendocino County Health Program. The county has long implemented a Healthy Mendocino program, and that program includes strategies that improve the health and well-being of residents. So these 3 things taken together really calls for and underscores the importance of having the general plan address environmental justice and health and wellness in its communities. Next slide, please. Now, the overriding purpose of an environmental justice element is to identify and reduce the unique or compound health risk in Mendocino County with a focus on disadvantaged unincorporated communities. So we will be looking very carefully to identify those disadvantaged unincorporated communities that are identified as such, around a variety of criteria. And we can talk about that later. But the purpose also is to make sure that no particular community in the county faces a very significant environmental hazard, and that each community and its residents are treated fairly with respect to provision of services. So the intent is to make sure that there are not extreme differences in service provision or environmental hazards among the communities to achieve some level of equity. Next, please. Now, environmental justice elements typically look at a very broad number of topics, and I've listed a couple here. One will be physical activity. It's typically we typically look at the types of physical activity opportunities that exist in the county, whether it's bicycle lanes or sidewalks or other opportunities for physical activity. Healthy food refers to the availability and the affordability of healthy food. So, for example, the location of grocery stores, relative to where residents live. Pollution exposure that residents may face, perhaps they're located near certain types of businesses or landfills that might have caused pollution exposure. A very big topic in Mendocino County will be public facilities and services, and that refers to not only fire and police services, but water, sewer, as well as another topic which is growing in importance, which is healthcare, particularly in your rural areas. The environmental justice element will look at safe and sanitary housing, public engagement, and finally also just an overall portrait of how healthy residents are and some of the major conditions that residents in Mendocino County face. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of defining what is a disadvantaged community, the state of California produced a tool called a CalEnviro screen, and that is used to identify disadvantaged communities based on community and population indicators. So what this tool does, it looks at every single census tract throughout the state of California, and it looks at various indicators within those tracts. Then it weights all the results, and then it compares, makes that comparison statewide. So we can actually compare how, for example, pollution exposure is in one census tract of Mendocino County versus the statewide average, or versus just an overall percentile in the state. Now, CalEnviro screen has not identified any particular census tracts or communities as disadvantaged, but that is compared to statewide data. And we do know that there are localized issues that are not adequately measured by statewide data. And so we also have to look at those. And so some of the issues that we've identified preliminary are healthcare access, medical care, availability of clinics and hospitals, legacy landfill sites, fire services among the different areas, the availability of septic and sanitation services, as well as groundwater threats in certain portions of the county. We also note that there are a number of issues that Mendocino County residents face. Part of that was suggested by the data that Cynthia presented regarding low-income, your low-income residents. Poverty and income is a critical issue in the county. There are quite a large share of the population are lower income and would have difficulty accessing many services. Unemployment rates tend to be high. We know there are some issues related to physical health and mental health, as well as high housing costs relative to what people earn, especially for individuals and families in the lower income categories. And next slide, please. So how are we going to supplement the information? We are going to be using secondary research from other types of studies that are ongoing to look at issues in the county. For example, we'll look at some of the health reports that are prepared by the local hospitals and clinics, as well as data from Healthy Mendocino County and other sources. We will be interviewing knowledgeable stakeholders about what are the key issues that residents in the county face, as well as providing an online survey where our residents of any community in the county can record what are those issues that are local to them that may be concerning with respect to environmental justice. This work altogether will lead to an element that contains objectives and policies that are intended to reduce health risk in Mendocino County communities, as well as affirmative programs that address these issues and improve the health and well-being in communities. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn it over back to Cynthia regarding the project schedule, and I'm open for any questions that you might have for clarifications.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Jones?
I don't think I have any questions at this time because I'm not as up on this topic, honestly, but it's interesting to hear the presentation, so thanks.
Great, thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Walsh, do you have anything else?
I do. I have
Great.
just kind of one last slide to show our project schedule. So just kind of give you an idea of where we are, where we're going. We will have two community meetings coming up in the next few months. Our goal is to submit the housing element to HCD in November. So we have a little bit of time to get this draft of both the housing element and the environmental justice element put together. We will bring the elements back to you and the Board of Supervisors prior to submitting to the state. So that's aimed for late fall, October, November. And the draft will obviously be out 30 days prior to that submittal. So this is where we are as of now, and Mark and I are available if you have any additional questions.
Thank you. Any additional questions from commissioners? All right, thank you very much. Staff in the room, anything else you want to add before we move along?
Nothing else from us on this. We do have one additional presentation on a different topic.
Yeah. Yes.
Question, because this impacts my district. So looking at the RENA numbers, and potentially we could potentially need to identify potential sites for housing. City of Ukiah is looking at doing an annexation. When you look at those areas heading out of the city limits, those could potentially be great housing sites given the infrastructure that's available and the proximity to town. How will that be looked at in regards to how would that override? I don't know if I'm not making myself clear. I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying, but because essentially that would mean if we have RENA numbers that we need to make, and then if it gets annexed, we no longer have that opportunity to incorporate into that into meeting our demands for the county. How does that work?
Absolutely. If I may, through the chair, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. So through the annexation process, there is a procedure where you go through a fair share housing determination where the county and the city actually negotiate about transferring some of our RENA allocation between the two jurisdictions. So that's meant to combat some of the concern over losing potential sites that you've identified for areas that could accommodate future development of housing. You go through that agreement process as part of the annexation procedure. So since it's very early stages of the City of Ukiah's potential annexation proposal, those conversations have not yet occurred.
Okay, just so that I make sure that I understand clearly. Because from what I understand, the City of Ukiah doesn't necessarily have issues with their RENA numbers, but I don't think it's as excessive as the county, and I don't know that that's accurate or not. But so what I'm hearing you say, there would be a agreement between the city and the county, and if the county needed those RENA numbers and those now that area would then be incorporated into the City of Ukiah, then they could potentially allocate those numbers towards the county.
So, how, with the RENA numbers that are assigned, where all the jurisdictions are planning for that housing, that number of units, we have to identify adequate sites that could accommodate that number of units. Mm-hmm. So, as part of the annexation process, we would look at the area of land that the city would potentially be annexing, and we would look at what is that fair share proportion of the housing allocation that's been given to the county. That essentially offsets that area that they would now be taking on. And those units, we'd have to go through probably an amendment to our housing element to actually formally transition those units.
I get it. So then potentially our RENA numbers would be
come
less.
down,
they
correct.
Would reflect the change. And okay.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions for staff from commissioners? All right. I'll open this up to public comment now. The commission will start public comment in the room, and then we'll hear from telecommenters that are connected virtually via Zoom. When you are called to speak, please state your name for the record. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are asked to please address their comments to the meeting chair and refrain from using profanity or engaging in conversation with members of the audience or staff. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Seeing some vigorous head shaking. None. Is there anyone on Zoom with a hand
We do have
raised?
one person from Zoom.
All right. Could you please identify yourself and start your comments?
Good morning. This is Valerie Stanley. I'm the TIPO for the Sherwood Valley Tribe in Willits. I just have a question. I haven't totally really dug into this plan, but I hear as housing, and we talk about planning for the future. What I'm not hearing is, what about the schools? That's great. You want to supply all these houses for families. Where are their children going to go to school? So, even if that's just a mention in this plan, but that's one thing. And the other thing is for their solid wastes, especially on the coast. It's so hard already to get rid of your trash. What happens with that? That's my comment. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I see Ms. Walsh making some notes on that. Thank you very much. All right. Any other hands raised on Zoom?
No other hands raised on Zoom.
All right. Well, then I will close the public comment period. Any final remarks from staff? All right. Any final remarks from our good friends at PlaceWorks? Okay.
Thank you for having us this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. All right. Any additional questions or comments from any commissioners? Commissioner Jones?
Just at some point before the final comes back for recommendation for Board of Supervisors, it would be nice to see a draft of the policies so that we could think about and contemplate those policies. And again, I just would really encourage that there be some addressing of vacation rentals and their impacts on affordability and access to housing in the housing element.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I guess I just have one sort of global question. How much, and this is probably to staff as much as to our consultants, how much modification is there from one element to the next? I haven't gone back and looked at the fifth or the fourth or anything, but are we anticipating that this will be a major revision from the last housing element, or any sense on that?
Russ Ford, Senior Planner. I mean, there's quite a bit of change between the housing elements or 8-year cycles. So I think we can anticipate quite a bit of difference between those. And then, like Commissioner Johnson noted, things like the annexation come in. So I would say a fair amount. I don't know if it's possible to put a number on that.
Okay.
And if I may just add a few
Please.
additional details, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. So part of the review that PlaceWorks will perform is looking at our current housing element and looking at the various goals and policies and action items and the success of those items. And part of the work that they do back and forth with staff is also identifying which of those items are programs that we wish to continue. Do we wish to replace those items? So we're still in the early stages where PlaceWorks is still conducting that review as well. So I don't know that we have a definitive to provide you at this point because we're still assessing sort of the effectiveness of those programs.
Okay. I guess I asked that question in large part because I know that the sort of legislative landscape has changed significantly since 8 years ago. And I'd be really curious to see how we did with development over the last 8-year cycle relative to what the realistic units were that were available out there, how many were actually constructed, so that we would have a sense as to whether or not we have a chance of meeting the goals that we're setting in this new element.
Absolutely. So the annual progress report that was mentioned as part of the presentation has actually been already submitted to HCD as of April 1st, but it will be going to the Board of Supervisors later this month. May 19th is the current date for that. And I'm happy to share a copy of that with the commissioners if you want to read through sort of some of the progress on the various housing element items, including the number of units that have been constructed.
That would be great, because I do think that if we, in the past when we haven't hit the target goals, there have been less ramifications than there could be in the current day and age.
Yeah, and I'll just note that I think we're seeing that this is happening statewide, that HCD has some very new, stricter, and stronger requirements. Alone just the number of units, it's almost a 300% increase for our county from what we had in the last cycle. So, and we're not the only jurisdiction that is feeling it. Jurisdictions across the state are all in the same boat. So
I don't mean to single out Mendocino County. I just think that this is where we have some agency.
Well, and as you've probably heard me say before, sometimes the rural jurisdictions, we have a tough time meeting some of the state housing requirements. The various jurisdictions and MCOG had a meeting with HCD yesterday as well to continue talking about our regional housing needs allocation because it has not yet been finalized. And as part of those discussions, we just continue to highlight the concerns about, when you receive numbers like this that have been given to our county and some of the factors they've taken into consideration and how they're distributing those units, it doesn't actually lend itself to some good planning at times. So we've just continued to advocate for HCD relooking at their process and looking at how they are distributing these units as well amongst the various jurisdictions.
When will we know what our housing need allocation is from HCD?
That's a great question. So we're going through right now review of the methodology. If HCD approves the methodology, then we will have from that methodology the final allocation. Tentatively, that is going to go to the MCOG board on June 1st.
Did we or MCOG make a proposed allocation number
We
to
have.
HCD?
Yes, that's the numbers that were included as part of this presentation.
Just as a rough ballpark, do you know what that number is of how many units?
So
we're
HCD
proposing?
has already determined the number that is required for the county, including the incorporated cities as a whole. That was that 6,456 number. And then for Mendocino County, it looks like ours is going to be right in that 3,500. And I can't remember the minimum amount, the last, tens of
3680, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
But that number is not definitive yet. That's
Not definitive yet.
Okay. Fingers crossed.
Thank
Not
you.
that I don't want us to develop housing, but again, we don't have infinite number of places to put it. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Oh, Commissioner Jones, thank you very much.
Sorry, I had just one last comment, and
Please.
this is through my experience of preparing and implementing the housing element for the city of Fort Bragg. And I think there can be a tendency to have like a lot of programs in a housing element that, given the county's limited capacity, and even in my case, the city's limited capacity, for our housing element this year, we're going to focus on fewer really focused programs. And I would encourage the county as well, especially because HCD is getting so like picky-uni about like, well, you didn't do this one and you didn't do that one. So to really focus on, like, instead of having 50 programs, have 5 or 10 and do them well. That would be my recommendation. It makes it easier to implement and track, and also just easier to be successful because you're not spread so thin. So that's just a recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. All right. Not seeing anyone else on the Richards. Oh, you were just moving your glasses. Okay, great. All right. Well, then we will move on to item 6B. This is a presentation, discussion, and possible direction to staff regarding the final visual resource analysis report and cultural resources analysis report for the Mendocino County Local Coastal Program by EMC Planning Group. I'm going to open the public hearing on this item. Have there been... Oh, it's not a public hearing. My script is deceiving me. Okay, well, I won't open a public hearing, but we do have do I still ask for comment? Yeah, okay, great. Has there been any correspondence or telephone calls received on this item?
No telephone calls received, correspondence.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, for this non-public hearing, can I have a staff presentation, please?
Good morning again, Russ Ford, Senior Planner. So I want to introduce EMC Planning Group, who are the consultants that are working on this project for us. So we're going to have their consultants give the presentation.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Holly Winiger. I can't seem to take my video off. There I am. Thank you. We're starting with the visual resources one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I went right from the housing one to ours. Okay, let's see. I think that's it. Are you seeing my screen, visual resource analysis?
It's beautiful.
Okay, wonderful. Again, I'm Holly Winiger. I am from EMC Planning Group. I'm a firm principal at the company. And we had previous staff had done visual resource analysis document, which I know you got into your agenda. And so I'm presenting the slides and the presentation for it. So the purpose of the visual resources analysis was to create a baseline understanding of the visual resources within the Mendocino County. It was an analysis to evaluate current policy effectiveness, and it was to a document to recommend revisions to existing policies to better protect visual resources. The entire Mendocino County coast is within the coastal zone. The coastal zone is about 3/4 of a mile to 4 miles inland within the county. These areas are governed by land use policies and the California Coastal Act. Mendocino County's local coastal program was adopted in 1991, allowing the county to impose regulations and policies within their coastal zone boundary. And we have a little map if somebody needs to go back to it. Mendocino has about 131 miles of coastline, expansive views of the Pacific Ocean framed by rugged, dramatic coastal mountains, rocky promontories, sea stacks, coastal bluffs, redwood forests, elfin forests, lagoons, river mouths, and sand dunes. It is important to maintain the visual resources for the visitor-serving economy and the quality of life for residents. Mendocino's local coastal plan does not currently include a specific definition or a list of criteria for what qualifies as an area as highly scenic. The California Coastal Commission's 2013 Local Coastal Program Update Guide provides the following guidance on what scenic resources should be considered highly scenic: rocky promontories and headlands, rocky shorelines, sandy beaches, coastal bluffs, coastal lagoons and marshlands, rural farmlands and pasturelands, and open and forested slopes, hillsides and ridgelines and mountaintops, harbors, marinas, waterfront areas, and cultural features in scenic areas and other historic or natural points of interest visible from public viewing areas and scenic corridors that may be considered scenic resources. The guidance recommends that the LCP updates include policies which address these scenic views and protections of scenic views, including signs and billboard regulations, lighting restrictions, design review process, grading regulations, measures to permanently protect significant views, and highway and roadway corridor design standards, such as bridge rails. Chapter 3.5 of the county's coastal land use plan states that highly scenic areas include areas identified on the land use maps as they are adopted, other scenic areas and historical districts as designated by the county, and the landscape preservation projects designated by the State Department of Parks and Recreation in the California Coastline Preservation and Recreation Plan of '71. Based upon the language contained on the land use maps, county staff created a GIS layer that designates highly scenic areas and conditionally highly scenic areas. Conditionally highly scenic areas refer to areas that are noted on the land use maps as only being subject to highly scenic area policies if visible from a certain vantage point, typically State Route 1. The existing land use plan does not have a term for conditionally high scenic areas and are subject to field inspection per project. EMC Planning Group recommends that the Mendocino County defines conditionally highly scenic area in the LCP and include clearly highly scenic areas and conditionally highly scenic area maps in the local coastal plan as layers on the county's GIS webpage, and include a general scenic protection policy that applies to the entire coastal zone. Development within the highly scenic areas is subject to the following regulations as set forth in Chapter 20.504.015B of the Implementation Plan for the Coastal Plan. The Coastal Permit Administrator reviews all incoming coastal development projects to determine if the project is within a highly scenic area. If there's a disagreement and if the project is within a highly scenic area, such disagreements shall be investigated by an on-site inspection by the landowner, agents, county staff member, and representatives from the Coastal Commission. After the site inspection, all members and representatives, if all members agree, the HSA boundaries for the project should be adjusted. Such development shall be approved only upon specific findings listed in the implementation plan, that the scenic resource as identified will not be significantly degraded by the proposed development. There's also something about special communities and neighborhoods. Development within special communities and neighborhoods is subject to Chapter 3.5 of the Land Use Plan and Chapter 20.504 of the Implementation Plan. The town of Mendocino is the only recognized special community in the coastal element and provides for specific criteria for new development in Mendocino. The communities and service centers designated as CRV and CFV1 of Westport, Caspar, Albion, Elk, and Manchester, and the additional areas of Little River, Anchor Bay, and Gualala has special protection as set forth in Section 20.504.020C of the Land Use Plan. There's special development criteria that goes along, which includes that the development shall be in the scope and character of existing development in the new neighborhood. New development shall be sited such that public coastal views are protected. The location and scale of a proposed structure will not have an adverse effect of other historic structures nearby, and the building materials and exterior colors shall be compatible with those of existing structures. Special treatment areas are defined by the Coastal Act as an identifiable and geographically bounded forested area within the coastal zone. It constitutes a significant habitat area of significance, and any land where logging activities could adversely affect public recreation or the biological productivity of any wetland, estuary, or stream, especially valuable because its role in the coastal ecosystem. Development within a special treatment area is subject to Chapter 3.5 of the Land Use Plan and Chapter 20.54 of the Implementation Plan. Special treatment area buffer zones were also located adjacent to publicly owned preserves and recreation areas, including national, state, regional, county, and municipal parks. These buffer zones include these forested areas within the coastal zone and within 200 feet of the publicly owned preserves and recreation areas. It is the intent of timber harvesting regulations within the special treatment areas to minimize the visual effect of timber harvesting in order to protect the area's special scenic and natural qualities. So we have some recommendations for the highly scenic areas. This was kind of what we already said, but based on a full review, it's been determined that the existing highly scenic area and conditionally highly scenic area designations are appropriately protecting significant visual resources. However, it is recommended that adding the northern bank of the Big River estuary within the Mendocino Headlands State Park be put into the conditionally HSA mapped area.
And
there are other
pardon me, Holly, if I could just add one comment here. Julia Krug, Planning and Building Services Director. I'll just note that staff did discuss this with state parks as well about adding that area as a conditionally highly scenic area. And the recommendation also came as a result of comments that were received from the public during our preparation of this report. So just adding that note.
And was state parks amenable to that?
Yes.
Great. Sorry, I had some computer issues for a second. The following policy recommendations are included to streamline permit processing, protect and enhance scenic view sheds, and encourage non-native vegetation removal, and encourage and streamline bridge and road repairs. These are recommendations in the visual resources report. As you know, we worked with staff on these and Julia, and these are the ones that are in the EMC planning document that you have as well. Clarify the definition of conditionally highly scenic area and the process for determining if highly scenic policies apply to proposed development in conditionally highly highly scenic areas. Include a general scenic protection policy that applies to the entire coastal zone. Encourage siting low-impact recreation, such as public trails in a highly scenic areas. Expand definition of viewshed to include areas visible from vista points, beaches, and public trails west of State Route 1. Amend existing policy 3.5-6 as it creates ambiguity by making the highly scenic area designation subjective, leading to uncertainty for applicants and difficulty for county staff to administer regulations. Consider amending vegetation removal policies in highly scenic areas to open up viewshed. There's some more. Allow removal of non-native vegetation without a CDP. Recommend biological resources consultant reviews definition of major vegetation. Include design standards for vista points. Include policy that identifies when story poles or visual simulations are required and allow visual simulations in lieu of story pole replacement. Include policy to recognize visual qualities of California Coastal National Monument. Include policies which support Caltrans road widening and bridge repair and replacement projects. Identify accepted guardrails and colors. Develop policy which specifically applies to special treatment areas. And it is recommended that CRV and CFV are corrected to RV Rural Village and FV Fishing Village, respectively. There are some mapping recommendations as well. It's recommended that the following figures are included in the update to the land use plan: highly scenic area and conditionally highly scenic area map, a Vista Points map, a special treatment areas map, and a map showing the areas subject to special protections as described in the implementation plan, special communities and neighborhoods. So the visual resources analysis for the County of Mendocino conclusions. The protecting visual resources supports tourism and quality of life and maintains Mendocino's coastal character. Improvements to policies to streamline permit processing, protect and enhance scenic viewsheds, and encourage non-native vegetation removal, and encourage and streamline bridge and road repairs are recommended. And providing maps of highly scenic areas and other visual resources will remove ambiguity. That concludes my presentation for the visual resources analysis.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from commissioners for staff or for our consultant? Please.
I have one question if no one else does, and that's, or maybe it's just a comment, and that is, there's an area where you talk about removing non-native trees, which I think is awesome and very overdue. But I just want to make sure that that caveat doesn't come into conflict with other policies that require you to keep trees. So just want to make sure there's some cross-referencing there so that staff knows, like, if these trees are considered a bunch and the community thinks they're beautiful, but they're non-native, like, where does that leave the property owner? So I just think that needs maybe a little bit of clarity. And I know it's not the appropriate time to comment, but in case I don't have time later, I just think this is really amazing work and needed, and really appreciate the thoughtfulness and care that went into it. So thank you.
And if I may, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director, I'll just note that certainly we'll be taking that into consideration as we look at both with our natural resources and habitat and natural resources consultant on the definition of major vegetation removal and looking at how we work in about invasive plants and still also ensuring that we have in areas where, vegetation enhances coastal views as well, to ensure that those areas are retained. So,
thank you.
And Holly, if I may, you are still sharing screen, if you don't mind.
I'm so sorry. I will stop sharing. I couldn't find my, I'm so sorry. I could not find my Zoom tab.
There wasn't anything too compromising that we saw. Don't worry about it. All right. Go ahead.
So I have 3 questions. Actually, piggybacking on to what she said, because I'm not super familiar. I'm getting more acquainted with with the county ordinances. Is there, and she referenced the trees. So one is, do we have a tree removal? We have a tree removal program or an ordinance that regulates what trees can be removed in a process? And do we have, this to me seems similar to that of it's a view ordinance. I'm thinking of Sausalito, which is kind of random, but you know, they have a view ordinance that essentially makes it so that you can't remove a tree in order that you can see the Golden Gate Bridge and enhance the value of your house. So what I'm understanding with this is, and I guess I'm asking because I wasn't quite sure what you just said. I know that there's, we have mandates based upon high fire severity zones. Do we have certain trees that are protected that would, you know, because that is part of the natural landscape, and there is value in a property owner potentially removing those trees so that they can see more. How does the county of Mendocino handle that?
Great question. So in the coastal zone, we have designated environmentally sensitive habitat areas, and we see in our coastal zone a huge portion of the forest communities that are along the coast and within the coastal zone are protected forest communities. So often any type of vegetation removal that you may be conducting is evaluated through a coastal development permit process. We are, and part of this effort with the LCP update is trying to look at how do we address some of these fire hazard concerns that, you know, especially meeting CAL FIRE requirements, defensible space requirements, and balance those with the requirements underneath the Coastal Act and under the county's LCP in also protecting those environmentally sensitive habitat areas. Because as you know, coming through planning, sometimes trying to balance all of the various agencies can be really difficult for a property owner. So trying to find pathways that we're able to make it clear what is permissible to be done. And part of that's looking at our definition of major vegetation removal. So major vegetation removal is considered development in the coastal zone. It requires a coastal development permit to be issued. So, you know, with the recommendation from EMC as part of this visual resources analysis report, we'd be looking at how do we balance the removal of invasive species along with that policy and the definition of major vegetation removal that the county is working on. And then I'll just note that we do have mapped areas that are designated as tree removal areas where tree removal is meant to be required as a condition of permit approval to enhance coastal views. Oftentimes the county has, like, especially in the case that there's environmentally sensitive habitat areas, that policy is softened and the conditions on that permit are softened to balance the protection of the environmentally sensitive habitat area with those tree removal policies. Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Richard. Oh,
I have
please.
two real
Yes.
quick questions. The story polls. So I wasn't quite sure as I read that, like, that isn't something that you want to use. I think story polls are super valuable in giving a perspective as to what the development's going to look like and what the impacts are going to be, not only from those who can see it driving by and from neighbors. So I wasn't unclear. It kind of sounded like they're trying to get away from that, or
the phrasing that's in there right now is that include a policy that identifies when story polls or visual simulations or renderings are required, and to potentially allow visual simulations or renderings in lieu of story poll placement. So right now, the county, we don't have, it's not very clear in the policies that were adopted or in the implementation program about when story polls are absolutely required to be done. So the recommendation from EMC is that we clarify that ambiguity, and that'll of course be a conversation that comes back in front of this commission as well when we're actually bringing forward the formal policies for your review and consideration.
Last question. So in expanding those areas, and I think it's fabulous. I mean, it's a very special place that needs to be protected. But in light of a housing element update that we need to require, that could potentially require us to have more housing, not that I think that those would be ideal locations. However, how does that come into play? Because they seem like they could, here we are potentially agreeing to expanding the area that is more restrictive in development, and not that they would necessarily be ideal for affordable housing. How do those, they seem like they work against one another?
It's also a great question. So development in the coastal zone has long been noted as a potential constraint or a challenge for development for housing within the coastal zone boundary, just because of the heightened requirements, the additional discretionary review process that's required. But the area, we're not wanting, the recommendation is not to change any of our current designated areas, the highly scenic areas and conditionally highly scenic areas. It's to add a portion that is fully within state parks land to make it conditionally highly scenic. So obviously no housing would be being developed on that site. So I don't think it's changing necessarily the status quo that we have right now. And removing areas or thinking about areas that would be removed from highly scenic areas based upon the commentary we received, and that generally what we were hearing from public and agencies is they felt like our visual resource policies were working well. So being responsive to that, sticking with that status quo, I think is in line with what the public and the various state agencies see as it's performing what it was supposed to do. It's meeting those goals. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Richards? Okay. Great. I don't have any questions at the moment either. All right. We'll now invite public comment on this item. Actually, sorry, my script is weird. So we're going to do this one, and then we're going to look at the other thing as a separate item, or how are we handling
There's
this?
2 presentations. It's from the same consultant. I think it's at the discretion of the chair if you'd like to take any sort of comment now on this presentation, and then again on the secondary presentation.
Do I have someone that wants to present or ask a question on this specific? Okay, great. I'll do that. All right, well, I'll open this up to public comment now, seeing some vigorous nodding in the audience. When you're called to speak, please state your name for the record. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are asked to please address their comments to the meeting chair and to refrain from using profanity or engaging in conversation with members of the audience or staff. Please.
Thank you, Chair Paulin. My name is Amy Wynn. I'm with Wynn Coastal Planning and Biology, and though I'm one person, I do, we have many clients over 20 years, so the comments that I've got reflect a number of perspectives. First and foremost, thank you to EMC for the work that you've done, and to county staff for the work that you've done with them. I know this is complicated. We are meeting our goals for protecting visual resources, as was stated a number of times in the report and the presentation today. I want for there to be a lot of caution about policies that are being recommended while we're already protecting our resources, and what the potential unforeseen impacts those policies would have. So I've got a lot of things. I know I'm not going to catch them all in 3 minutes, but one thing is which order? I had them all in order, but for one of the policy recommendations, include a general scenic protection policy that applies to the entire coastal zone. I have so many questions that are, what does that mean? What is that specifically? We're already protecting views to and along the coast, and if we're not having degradation of our visual resources, what does expanding the definition of what does expanding, or creating a general scenic protection policy do? Keep in mind that let's see, sorry. I'm constantly changing the order of what's the most valuable thing. I think one of the most valuable things for balancing our needs for housing, understanding that, somebody that's buying a bluff top property is not taking care of our, the HNRA, I don't know how to say that, goals. But when we are looking at highly scenic areas and conditionally highly scenic areas, I think those tools have worked really well. In the conditionally highly scenic areas, it makes a really big difference. So one thing I want to recommend is perhaps considering switching some of the mapped highly scenic areas to conditionally highly scenic areas. Think of Cleone and Ward Avenue, right? We're looking west of the highway. That's mapped as being highly scenic, but you cannot see the coast from there. And it's, our resources are protecting views to and along the coast. If we make that zone conditionally highly scenic, then if we have the potential to impact views to and along the coast, fine, we can do that. But if we don't, then that means that those applications can automatically be perhaps an administrative coastal development permit rather than a standard coastal development permit. The difference is not only financial for the application, but also the fact that a standard is automatically appealable to the Coastal Commission, and that makes things more difficult. If we don't really have the potential to impact those resources, then consider using that as a judgment tool for conditionally highly scenic areas. And I don't see my timer. I know I'm not going to get through kind of any of this. But another one is when we talk about our landscape and the rural aspect of our county. Thank you. 2:10. Okay. I just put my glasses on. When we think about the rural aspect of our coast, and you know, a lot of the times we think of that beautiful elk landscape. In the report, it's really interesting, fascinating to see that the example of agricultural landscape is of a structure that would not be permissible now with our highly scenic policies. So I think when it comes, because it was a white barn out in the middle of nowhere. So I think it's really important to really be very careful about, and also with those agricultural landscapes, everything there is going to be a standard CDP. Standard CDPs, again, are appealable to the Coastal Commission. They're more difficult to go through than an administrative CDP. And when you're trying to, when you're one of the priority uses in the coastal zone, our coastal zone is agriculture, making all those improvements. Like if you need to replace your siding in the agricultural coastal zone of our county, coastal zone, highly scenic area, you have to go through a standard CDP to do that. If you need to build, like, you know, and anyways, just think about that, please, carefully and slowly. And let's see, keep in mind that these policies are doing a great job protecting our visual resources. We are the pearl of the entire coast. The Coastal Commission loves what we've got going on up here. I would also have expressed caution about, I don't understand what encouraging the siting of low impact recreation is. Is there a nexus for that? I would like to understand more about that. And does this mean increasing public access mapping, or are we going to ask for more trails around the place? And thank you. I'll probably talk with staff individually. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I guess I would just ask, if since we're on a limited amount of time and you seem like you've got some great thoughtful comments, if you want to submit that in writing, that would be helpful. And especially if there are specific areas that you would recommend switching from designated as highly scenic to conditionally highly scenic, that would be a great thing for staff to be able to reference.
We can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, please.
So I would argue that sometimes putting a nice house on a bluff it can achieve affordable housing by providing an ADU. So the question is would the state override, because they've streamlined everything, and if we make it, because it sounds, and I'm not familiar with the coastal process, the permit that she references, if you want, it sounds like it makes it more difficult to get one house, let alone get an ADU, makes it more difficult. So, but if somebody got through the process for building their house and they wanted to do an ADU, would they be able to do it streamlined, or would the coastal? Will you speak upon that, please?
Absolutely. So right now, our ADU chapter, it has certain objective standards that if you're able to satisfy those, you can do what's called a ministerial coastal development permit. And it's a much more streamlined processing, but it's really intended for just if you're doing an ADU that meets those objective standards. One additional requirement that was added by the commission as we went through that certification process was a requirement that a deed restriction be recorded that neither unit on the property, the primary residence or the ADU, be rented for less than 30-day stays. So it is ensuring that there is each unit that gets built as an ADU is for long-term housing. And then if you do not meet those objective standards, you can come through an administrative coastal development permit process, and actually recent state legislation has made it so that those permits, the commission used to say if it was in an area appealable to them, that then there was an appeal period with them. State law has taken that away. So now if it's in an area appealable to the commission, if it's an ADU, it is actually not appealable to their office. So.
Thank you. All right. Are there any public comments on Zoom that would like to be made?
There are no hands raised in Zoom.
All right, great. I'm going to move on then to the second part of the presentation then. Copacetic for everybody? All right. Go ahead, Holly.
And so if I may, I'll just introduce this item while Holly gets her screen up and going. So this is for our cultural resources analysis. We did hold, went through a series of review with this cultural resources analysis, including the consultant had some discussions with the county's archaeological commission. And then also we held a community workshop as well where folks were given an opportunity to provide comment. And with that, I will turn it over to Holly for her presentation.
Thanks, Julia.
And Holly, you're currently muted.
Thank you, Julia. I'm just having some difficulties with this Zoom, so sorry. Um, so this is, as Julia said, this is the cultural resources analysis for the County Mendocino Planning Commission. The AMC Planning did a cultural resource analysis for the Mendocino County, and as Julia mentioned, we did do extensive meetings with the county staff, and this is the presentation for the report. The purpose of the archaeological resources analysis was to provide an update for the local coastal plan and to basically evaluate the current policy effectiveness. It was also to provide mapping of known cultural resource areas and to recommend revisions to existing policies to better protect cultural resources. The county's coastline is characterized by its rugged, rural, and largely natural state, featuring dramatic ocean views, rocky promontories, and sea stacks, sea caves, mountains, cliffs, marine terraces, sand dunes, and river estuaries. The area has been preserved in its natural condition compared to other, more developed parts of the California coast. Mendocino County has a long history of indigenous habitation, with native peoples living and thriving in the coastal area for millennia. Tribes historically associated with Mendocino County include the Cato tribe of Laytonville, Coyote Valley Band of Pomo Indians, excuse me if I mess up on some of these, the Guideville Rancheria of California, Hopland Band of Pomo Indians, Manchester Point Arena Band of Pomo Indians, Noyo River Indian Community, Pinoleville Pomo Nation, Potter Valley Tribe, Redwood Valley and Little River Band of Pomo Indians, and Round Valley Indian Tribes of the Round Valley Reservation, Sherwood Valley Rancheria of Pomo Indians, and Yokayo Tribe. The county's existing local coastal program uses the terms archaeological resources. Based on CEQA guidelines, the 2018 Coastal Commission guidance and current best practices, the LCP update will include a recommendation to update the terminology to cultural resources and tribal cultural resources. Cultural resources covers both historical and archaeological resources. Tribal cultural resources are sites, features, places, cultural landscapes, sacred places, and objects found to have cultural value to a California Native American tribe. According to search results for the California Historical Resources Information System, known as CRIS, a Northwest Information Center, NWIC, and NWIC, there are prehistoric and historic archaeological resources throughout the Mendocino's entire coastline. The following and federal state laws govern and protect cultural and tribal cultural resources, particularly archaeological sites, and particularly the protection of information. Section 304 of the National Historic Preservation Act allows the federal government to withhold information about the location and characteristics of a historic property or archaeological site if revealing such information to the public could cause harm, theft, or destruction to the property or cultural resources. Section 9A of the Archaeological Resources Protection Act is also designed to protect vulnerable archaeological sites from looting, vandalism, and other damage by authorizing confidentiality of information. Executive Order 13007 directs federal agencies to maintain confidentiality of sacred sites and to accommodate access to and ceremonial use of sacred sites by American Indian tribes. Section 6254.10 of the California State Government Code exempts certain records from public disclosure under the California Public Records Act. The following federal and state laws require tribal consultation for known archaeological and cultural sites. Section 106 of the Natural Historic Preservation requires the federal government to consult with tribal historic preservation officers. Senate Bill 18 requires California government to notify and consult with California Native tribes about proposed land use plans that could affect traditional tribal cultural places. California's AB 52 is a law that requires public agencies to consult with traditionally and culturally affiliated California Native American tribes on projects reviewed under CEQA. And in 2018 guidance, California Coastal Commission adopted a tribal consultation policy intended to improve communications between public agencies and federally and non-federally recognized California Native tribes. Right now, in the local coastal plan, there is for Mendocino County, the archaeological resource policies are under policy 3.5-10, CDPs and associated permits and development. Also, local coastal policy 3.510 also refers to Mendocino County's archaeological ordinance. And it also is outdated and does not adhere to current and federal state requirements regarding confidentiality and tribal consultation. Our recommendations are to revise the land use plan and the upcoming update to replace the term archaeological resources with cultural and tribal cultural resources. This revision is based on CEQA guidelines, Coastal Commission guidance, and current best practices, and to revise the local coastal plan 3.5-10 to remove reference to Mendocino County Code section 22.12 and include a new process in the local coastal plan. Two procedure options were presented to the county staff, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And county staff does prefer option one because it retains a conservative approach to protecting cultural and tribal cultural resources by continuing to refer all development applications to the NWIC and requiring an archaeological survey for all projects that are determined to have medium to high probability of potential impacts to cultural resources and aligns more with the Coastal Commission guidance. I'm not too sure who can see this and who can't, but it is small. It is a table 3.1 in your packets in the visual resource analysis, and there also is. You also got a copy of the presentation. Did you want me to go over these, Julia?
I don't think so. We have it available in the report and can answer any questions of the commission when we get there. Okay, thank you. So there are additional policy recommendations for cultural resources. There are currently no policies that address natural coastal erosion, which may be accelerated due to sea level rise and climate change. And additionally, the land use coastal plan does not contain any policies regarding tribal consultation. So the following new policies are recommended to reflect and align with tribal consultation, CEQA guidelines, and CEQA Commission guidance. Document and protect archaeological sites that are at risk from environmental hazards, and recognize that environmental hazards will impact resources. Include a policy which requires public access trails to be sited a safe distance away from archaeological sites. Include the most current Coastal Commission tribal consultation policy in the new LCP. Include a policy which encourages establishing a respectful and effective means of communicating and consulting with all tribes.
require new discretionary development that may result in ground disturbance to avoid impacts to cultural resources through siting and design measures to the greatest extent feasible, and require county staff to report all known and newly discovered resources to the appropriate tribal community, agency, or organization. Oh. That was weird. So that's the conclusion of my slideshow. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners?
And if I may just add one additional piece of comment, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. So I just want this commission to be aware that the Board of Supervisors has previously given direction to county staff to make the necessary ordinance amendment to discontinue with the Archaeological Commission. And that direction was given, I want to say, almost 2 years ago, I think.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and part of this is because it's part of the local coastal program, that process is incorporated in as part of our LCP update. So I just wanted to make sure the commission had that fact pattern as well.
I think, yeah.
I noted that on table 3.1, procedure option 2 has the in alignment with Board of Supervisors direction. I'm just curious why are we looking at another procedure option? Is it required by state law, or is it just so we could have another potential option, or is this going to be presented back to the Board of Supervisors for further consideration?
Sure, I think so. EMC provided a couple recommendations for consideration of staff. So the one recommendation was just you require an archaeological survey for everything. Or the other option is continuing with our referral process, which is to Northwest Information Center, and then basing the requirement of an archaeological survey upon those results. So staff thinks that the best approach is to opt for the first option, which is for the referral to Northwest Information Center, and then basing the requirement for an archaeological survey upon their response, because sometimes they respond and say this area is 100% covered, there's no need for additional study, or it has a low probability of having resources, therefore we don't recommend further study. So if you went with the secondary option and just required an ARC survey for everything, you could end up just subjecting folks to higher cost when it's really not necessary to do so. So, in terms of where we're at in the process now, these are the recommendations coming from the consultant, coming to county staff. County staff will then prepare policy recommendations and implementation program based upon the recommendations, and also further discussion with this commission as well as the Board of Supervisors. Ultimately, this commission will be making a report and recommendation to the board on the overall LCP update.
But does it seem like staff will be making recommendation and that procedure option 1 on table 3.1 is what is selected?
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Johnson.
Sure, I had two questions. One was about the new policy about sea level changes and erosion. And I guess I'm just wondering, how is that actionable? Like maybe it's just an acknowledgement that it's a problem that's happening, but how does that actually change the way that anybody does a development project? So I guess that's one sort of, maybe it's a philosophical question, I'm not sure. And the other question has to do with the extent of archaeological studies that are just required. And I guess this is kind of a question for Julia. I know the county has a lot of big parcels, and so when someone's getting an ARC study, do you really just limit it to the proposed area development plus 100 feet circle around that so that you make sure you have a buffer, or how is that determined? I just don't know. And if it seems, if you are requiring an ARC study for an entire site when development is not proposed for the entire site, that seems wrong-headed. So I'm sorry, just ignorant. Thanks for writing info. Bye.
So I can answer, I think, or provide context for both of those. So one, again, we're doing multiple different studies as associated with this LCP update. So separately, we also have sea level rise analysis that's being conducted. And we also are working on a set of baseline policies that will come forward to this commission. I'm forecasting that'll come forward in midsummer to you all. But what I think these recommendations, we will try to work with our sea level rise consultant and also working with our existing policies that surround things like erosion, grading, and hazard reduction, and see about if we're able to incorporate some level of consideration around cultural resources as well. And especially, based upon any recommendations that may come out of a cultural resources analysis or archaeological survey report. And then secondarily, to answer your other question, right now our current ordinance requires that a survey be done of the area. It's APAE is the acronym, and I think it's the area of potential like archaeological impact, what I want to say, and it's within, should be 100 feet around it. Now, obviously, the Archaeological Commission, depending on what type of project it is, may have specific recommendations that surround that, and including an archaeologist may have specific recommendations on the scope of that survey. But that would be, the required distance and the requirements for what that survey would need to cover would be detailed within an updated archaeological resources ordinance or cultural resources ordinance. Sorry, I need to get my terminology changed in my head to really meet with the recommendations from here.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
I was just curious because it says the drawbacks for the section option is that it's more costly to the applicant because then they have to get the archaeological study. What is the cost to the county for referring it to NWIC?
So right now, it's actually a cost that's passed through to the applicant. It's $75.
Perfect.
Commissioner Richards?
Keep sort of answering my own questions, but I guess I was surprised to see that currently in the LCP, there's no required consultation policy with the tribes, with any tribal entity?
Our LCP was written originally in 1905.
Oh.
And there's discussion about protection of, archaeological resources, but there's not strong tribal consultation policies. It hasn't been comprehensively updated, and there hasn't been any focused updates specifically addressing tribal consultation. Though the department does still adhere to state law requirements surrounding tribal consultation.
That's great, because that's a sensitive area.
Yeah.
So we haven't included, I'm looking at the additional policy recommendations, one of those is to include the most current Coastal Commission tribal consultation policies into the LCP. Even though it's not formally adopted into the LCP, we are complying with those policies currently.
We are complying with the requirements under state law. So right. SB 18 when that's applicable, and AB 52 as applicable as well.
Okay. But potentially in this LCP update, we would just be incorporating that
potentially more specific policies. Yeah. Okay, clear.
Great. Thank you. All right. Any other questions for any other commissioners? Okay. Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Come on down. Same thing. When you're called to speak, please state your name for the record. 3 minutes. Don't swear. Thank you.
That part always disappoints me. Amy Wynn with Wynn Coastal Planning and Biology. Thank you, Chair Pollen and commissioners and EMC. Oh, I almost got that backwards. And staff for all of this. I am not sure I fully understand because I haven't done the homework to figure out why the specifically why the Archaeological Commission is going away as a tool. I want to. I think my main concern with referring projects out to NWIC and then county staff basing their recommendations on NWIC is that that's a little bit of a blunt tool, NWIC. I absolutely want to make sure that we don't impact the resources of the cultural landscape, the physical landscape of the first people that have been here. I've found being invited into the Archaeological Commission meetings to be really informative and rewarding, and helps us do early design work on a project and figure out okay, when do we need to engage an archaeologist? There are instances where that local control of having the commission being able to be more specific and nuanced in recommendations, either increasing protections or seeing that their specific project doesn't have the potential to impact resources, and any other project on that that kind of property would have the potential to have another archaeological report in the future. So what I am looking for is policy or structure that really retains a very well-informed local review, that also then allows for applicants to consult with the county and a really well-informed staff person on how best to work with protecting those resources, and when an archaeological report is necessary, and when avoidance measures are really necessary. So sometimes we have to get a coastal development permit to drill a well. And when an archaeological report is required for that, well, basically you're digging holes around where you're going to dig a really deeper hole. So it's like, how do you want, ARC reports $40,000, sometimes $30,000. So I'd like that nuance, that local control. And so I'm wondering if there's maybe a possibility for there to be a pilot program for a part-time staff person from perhaps one of the local tribes. I know there have been some very active people from local tribes participating, and I think historic resources are a little bit easier to identify and protect, but cultural resources, it's like those local tribal members really know everything about where their people have been now and for the millennia beforehand. I do understand that the process is a lengthy process, but I think that would allow for some more efficient. So I'm just looking for that local knowledge where NWIC is really, and I know I've gone over, thank you for not buzzing. I don't know how I am longer on this one than the other one, but NWIC is an amazing database, an amazing resource. But they are really the place where all those reports are gathered and all that data is gathered, and they will tell you whether something there's potential for resources to be there. They do not really, and so they'll say, nope, no report has been here. There are resources in the area, we need a report. But it's not nuanced to what's the potential for that particular project to have an impact. So that's where I'm looking for, like, the ability to be nuanced and I know it can be overwhelming for staff that it's who has that knowledge. Well, the first people that have been here have that knowledge. So I'd love to be able to retain that local control in some manner, understanding that the ARC Commission is going away. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Any other members of the public in the room would like to speak on this item? All right. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
We have Valerie Stanley on Zoom.
Valerie Stanley, please.
Valerie Stanley from the Sherwood Valley Tribe. Have quite a few comments. I'm looking at what you have, the option 1 with the NWIC. If there has to be anything, I think that's good. When I'm not hearing, and it's the same old thing, I am Indigenous. I'm from the Fort Bragg area. My father was born on Noyo Beach. We've been there for hundreds of years, even before the Mendocino Reservation was something. And my family keeps that in their oral history, so I know the area and the coast. So what we look at when we get notices from the county, it does talk about NWIC. They're not perfect. They miss a lot of things. That's why the tribe puts in their input. They have what they recorded. But you have to remember, a lot of these areas, they have never been surveyed and looked at. People just came here and kind of shoved the Indians out of the way. So, we along with the county, we consult with NWIC. And then I just had a couple other questions. On the LCP, it was 3.5-10, I believe, where it talks about medium to high impact. Where is that? What's the definition of that? What's that mean? Because something can be a low impact, and good example is Salmon Creek Bridge. There's that old mill site there, but my people were there first, and it's all full of lead. So now digging down there, digging a well was referred to, we are going to be there. If you dug a well, you're going to come up with cultural resources. That's part of why we want that. That's why we question septic tanks. So our people get dug up all the time. Our resources. I don't mean our people. And then the last bullet about you would put yourself in the place to notify the appropriate tribe. Mendocino County, we've got 10 tribes and 2 unrecognized. I don't think you should put yourself in the position that if there's something, let's say in the middle of Highway 20, that don't put yourself in the position, oh, we're going to contact Sherwood. You know, do you know? I don't think you should keep doing what you're doing, county, because it works. It may not be the greatest, but it works. I would not try to determine what tribe it is. And with the art commission, I don't see it going away. I think it serves a very good purpose for this county. They bring forth a lot of things. And I have noticed lately with plans that they look very closely at things. Perhaps you're doing a project on 10 acres. They're not requiring all 10 acres to be surveyed. You know, they're starting to get more specific to what the plan is, if it's a septic, if it's foundation work, those types of things like that. Because the one thing the county art commission does do when they approve projects or say, you know, you need a survey, they always include a discovery clause so that, you know, that is protection right there for the tribes as well. And I think that was it. And then I just wanted to say for Sherwood Valley and Noya, we've been working with EMC since last year on this project. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, any other comments on Zoom?
No other hands raised in Zoom.
All right, thank you very much. Any final comments from staff or from EMC?
Yeah, I'll just note that, you know, to the last speaker, I'll just note that the discovery clause is not going away. That is likely to be a continued item. It really is about when you're doing construction and you have an accidental discovery, it requires notification procedures that are performed. Now, some of those notification procedures may be slightly adjusted because some, I believe, does refer back to also the Archaeological Commission, but the whole thought process behind having that discovery requirement, that will continue.
Great, thank you. All right, anything else from EMC?
No, I will add option number 1. I do work in other cities and other counties, and option number 1 is very common for different counties and cities to use for archaeological resources. The county will notify NWIC and get something from them on whether it should be further studies need to be made. So it is a very common practice for lots of different agencies. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. All right, any final questions or comments from commissioners? All right, just one last question for staff. When will these 2 elements come back in their near final form?
That's a great question. So I think what we'll probably be doing is how we're doing it with the Coastal Commission is what I'll say is as we complete chapters, we're making those available for early Coastal Commission comments as well. And likely what will happen is I think that we'll be planning to do some engagement with the commissioners as we get back those comments from Coastal Commission, incorporate their comments. So that way when we come forward to you with, because it's going to be a very large packet that would come forward, that you've essentially had a preview of each of those chapters before it's getting in front of you. And it may be that we bundle several of them, but so you have an idea on the timelines. Our date when we are submitting our LCP amendment to the Coastal Commission is December 31st, 2027. So over the next year and a half, we'll be having a lot of engagement on LCP update discussions with you as we start down the environmental impact report process. There's going to be a lot of engagement happening with this commission as well as with the board.
So are we likely to see a couple other chapters every few months?
Yes. The next ones, the next presentations like this that I expect that you'll see are going to be related to our traffic counts and then also our habitats and natural resource policies.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Commissioner Jones.
Sorry, you asked if anybody had questions and I didn't get my hand raised quickly enough. So I just wanted to follow up on what Amy said about the visual resource stuff and really encourage staff and the consultant to take a good look at those maps because they really do, they are the meat of the regulatory authority, and think through where things need to really be in the visual resource analysis required, and maybe where some things could get moved over into a more formalized process for a conditional visual resource analysis. I think that could end up saving a lot of time and money in certain specific situations where it's warranted. So I would encourage thinking through that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Yeah, and I'll just echo that sentiment, and back to Amy and everyone else that's paying attention, please submit additional comments that you might have after. You have, come on up, back real quick. I didn't actually officially close the public comment, so.
I can pretend I'm somebody else.
Pretend.
Thank you, Commissioner, or Chair Paul and Amy Wynn, Coastal Planning and Biology. Relative to cultural resources, I'm wondering if it's through the chair, I would like to understand why the Archaeological Commission can't meet a confidentiality tool. I mean, I don't know. We have Zoom meetings where people aren't allowed in, and then we could come in. We used to have them all in person, and we would sit out in the hallway and then come in. But I'm wondering what the barrier is to that. Is that Zoom is not protective enough? It was a great tool, so thank you very much.
Good question. I don't know.
So if I may, and I may see if council wishes to add anything after I finish as well. This came forward to the dissolution, and that direction from the board came forward because of concerns about it being a Brown Act body, so open and public, information and materials needing to be transparent and available to the public. And the confidentiality requirements surrounding archaeological resources. It's also been a bit challenging, I think, especially when we went into the pandemic and started having conversations surrounding archaeological resources of how do you retain the confidentiality of what that resource is, and having a discussion regarding how you protect that resource. So I think that was part of the impetus behind it, is the fact that it's a Brown Act body and reviewing confidential information. And I don't know if council wishes to add anything.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. In short, that's the main reason. Is the Brown Act doesn't really consider closed sessions on these kinds of issues. And as we did some research, or staff did research, we couldn't find that there were many other of these kind of commissions out there in other jurisdictions in terms of how they were handling it. So if you're going to create a commission in code, that's a Brown Act body 100%. So that's a difficult situation for that. We're obviously haven't figured out a final mechanism to do this. We're not saying do less work. We're just trying to figure out how ways to do it where it's not creating an inherent problem of how we're dealing with reports and studies on resources.
Thank you. All right. Well then, no final comments from commissioners. I'll close this portion of the meeting. All right. Thank you all very much. Agenda item number 7, matters from staff. Do we have any? It looks like none.
I do actually.
Oh,
just a couple of quick notes about upcoming hearings. So I know that we had a pretty quiet winter. It looks like we're going to have a slightly busier spring. So just a heads up to the commission and for any of the public listening on some upcoming items here. So the next meeting, May 21st, we currently have 2 items scheduled. One is a rezone for MRC. They're going from TPZ to FL. That's the first time the department's had an application like that in about 25 years, so that could be a good discussion. We also have the admin permit for the Mendoza-Lopez temporary events. That one's been elevated from the zoning administrator. It's fairly controversial, so we'll probably see a lot of public participation on that one. June 4th, we have the Kadiala use permit for the short-term rental, which was previously heard and is coming back for denial. We also have a use permit modification for Northern Nights, and I believe it's a renewal for the Northern Nights Festival. And then currently on June 18th, we have just a single item, a general plan amendment and rezone for Phillies Creek Vineyards, which is going from rangeland to ag, and there's still time for more items to get on the June 18th agenda. But just a preview of some upcoming action items there.
Thank you. Oh boy, action-packed. All right. Any questions for staff from the commission on that? Okay, great. Do we have any matters from the commission? Any commissioners have an item they'd like to bring forward? Okay. All right. Well, then I will invite a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Richards. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. I hope you feel better soon, Commissioner Jones.